In my senior year of high school, I told my mother about my severe depression. She said I was hypocritical and that it was the whining of the weak. Later, when I held a solo exhibition and mentioned the people I wanted to thank in the spotlight, my mother naturally stood up. My eyes stayed on her for only a second and then passed by. I walked towards Jason, who was once hated by my mother. I hugged him tightly. Chapter 1. I struggled for a long time before I decided to see a doctor. When I got the report confirming that I was suffering from severe depression, I felt relieved. I felt something was wrong with me a long time ago. At first, I didn't want to interact with others anymore, I just wanted to be alone and quiet. Sometimes I would become irritable and restless for no reason, and sometimes I would suddenly become pessimistic, as if I could think of bad results for anything that happened around me. Later, I suffered from insomnia, frequent awakenings, loss of appetite, depression, and inability to concentrate. My mother found that my grades had declined, and asked me without asking why, whether I was distracted by a relationship like my sister. She began to investigate the people I usually contacted at school to see if there were any suspicious people. She arranged my study plan more fully, trying to make me make up for the gap with diligence. So I didn't have time to think about the reason for the change, and could only force myself, who was already powerless, to study harder. Until I had auditory hallucinations from time to time, and the feeling of despair and impending death swept over me in the dead of night, I wanted my mother to ask for leave for me and take me to the hospital for treatment. But when she asked me what was wrong, I couldn't tell her. I just felt that every day was a torment. I always fantasized that if I could get through today, maybe tomorrow would be better. But it didn't happen. The next day was the beginning of the torment again. So my mother scolded me, saying that it was an excuse for me to be lazy and not want to go back to school to study, and coldly ordered me to go back to school on time, and then she dragged her luggage and went on a business trip. Finally, I went to the hospital alone. No one knows how scared I am that I can't find the reason why I have completely changed. The self who had suicidal thoughts countless times made me feel strange and painful. I clearly wanted to do something to change, but I seemed to have lost all my motivation. And now, I finally found the reason. It turned out that I was sick. It's not really like what my mother said, that I became like this because of laziness and lack of ambition. I thought to myself, it's just a disease, it's not incurable. The doctor prescribed me medicine, but still told me that love and companionship are the best medicine. So I found my mother's WeChat and told her my diagnosis. In fact, I am not without the need to confide. When I was swept by despair, I would also want to live. So I reached out to my mother, hoping that she could save me. Soon, my mother's replies popped up in my phone. She was on a business trip and was in the car to meet a client, so it was inconvenient for her to talk to me. Otherwise, I would only face an attitude that was colder than words. Zoe, don't make excuses for your lack of effort. I think your so-called depression is very hypocritical. It's the whining of the weak. Don't tell me you're stressed. Who hasn't been through this? Who doesn't have stress? In order to provide you with a rich life and the best teaching resources, I sleep less than 5 hours a day. Why don't I have depression? You don't have the talent of your sister, so please adjust your mentality, face your shortcomings, and work harder instead of using ridiculous depression as an excuse. Do you understand? Let me say something to hurt you. If you continue to be so weak and evasive, you will only become a loser in school and society. It's a shame for me. I hope you don't let me down for the hard work I put in for you. Every word she said broke my already on the verge of collapse. I was alone in the room, crying without making any sound, but my heart seemed to be tightly grasped by a hand, and I was so uncomfortable that I could hardly breathe. Finally, I still asked her with trembling hands, "Mom, do you love me?" She replied, "If you have time to ask such hypocritical questions, you might as well do 2 more questions." Oh, yes. Mom only likes excellent daughters, such as my sister. But she is gone. Chapter 2. I once had an older sister who was 6 years older than me. She was very outstanding since she was a child. She won the qualification to be admitted to a prestigious school through competition in her senior year of high school and was the pride of her mother. However, she, who was so dazzling, chose to end her life at the age of 20. At that time, I followed my mother, crying and calling her to come down, my face pale. And my sister looked back at me with tears in her eyes, and said to me in a hoarse voice, "Zoe, you have to live your own life well, don't go the same way as me." After that, she jumped down without even looking at my mother. My mother said that it was that boy who harmed my sister and made her unable to focus on her studies. My mother also ordered me not to fall in love too early, and not to let love cloud my mind in the future. At that time, the anger and unwillingness in her eyes greatly covered the heartache of losing her daughter. Not long after, my mother made the family of the boy who harmed my sister in her mouth restless. I heard that the boy lost the qualification to go abroad as an exchange student, and his mother also lost her job. After the matter was resolved, she placed her only hope on me. My brain is not as smart as my sister, and my grades can only remain in the top 10 in the class. Compared with my sister's first grade, I am really far behind. My mother firmly believed that lack of talent must be compensated by acquired learning, so she arranged double exercises and full remedial classes for me. I was like a clockwork machine that could not stop for a moment. My grades also improved, and I could basically stay in the top 10 of the grade. But my mother looked at my report card and still shook her head and sighed, "Still not as good as your sister." The light in my eyes gradually faded, and I lowered my eyes and said nothing. My mother never thought about how much effort I, who was so stupid in her eyes, had to put in to climb to this rank little by little. She only thought that I was not diligent enough. But what should I do? I have obviously tried my best, but it is still not enough. My mind and body were tired. Can't my mother really accept me who is not so good? I didn't dare to ask my mother this question, because she would only ask me why I couldn't do what my sister could do. If I can't be as good as my sister, I won't have a good way out. A good way out? I can't even see the road ahead. After recognizing the reality, I no longer hope that my mother will save me. 3 months later, I made the same choice as my sister did. For years ago, my sister would still look back at me at the last moment of her life, but when I stood on the edge of the top floor, I opened my arms without a word and fell backwards, like a kite with a broken string. How desperate must I be to give up this world without hesitation, without even a trace of attachment? The last impression in my mind was the endless darkness in front of me, the whistling cold wind in my ears, and the discomfort in my heart caused by the rapid fall of my body. To be honest, at that time I felt more alive than ever before. At least my heart is not like a pool of stagnant water, without any ripples. I thought I could be free. However, when I opened my eyes again, I saw the snow-white ceiling and the smell of disinfectant all around. I didn't die, the shed on the first floor gave me a buffer. But I was injured and needed a long period of recuperation. When my mother rushed in, her eyes were bloodshot. I couldn't see a trace of heartache in her eyes, but she scolded me with a bitter look. "Now you have learned to use death to resist me, right? In order to become a useless person with a legitimate reason, you are not afraid of death? If you are really not afraid of death, you should find a place without any shelter and jump down from a high enough floor. It's better than being half dead now. If it weren't for my injury now, I guess she would want to slap me. Did I owe you in my previous life? I spent so much effort to raise you 2 sisters, but what did you do to repay me? Ah? How could I give birth to 2 useless things like you?" I stared at the ceiling blankly, my ears buzzing, and I didn't feel much when facing my mother's abuse. Severe depression made me slow down even my reaction. I suddenly remembered myself when I was still in elementary school, lying on the desk while drawing, and enviously telling my sister who was doing homework that my mother favored her very much and didn't spend much time on me. My sister stopped writing, looked at the night outside the window and whispered, "My mother's favoritism is conditional." Then she rubbed my hair again, her eyes were very gentle. "Zoe is very good to be able to study and live freely like now." At that time, I was young, and I didn't understand what my sister meant by conditional. Later, I realized that my mother's love needs us to repay it with absolute excellence. Over the years, I just walked back to my sister's old path and experienced her feelings at that time. Did my sister really commit suicide for love? Chapter 3. Due to my physical and psychological condition, my mother had no choice but to arrange for me to temporarily take a leave of absence even if she wanted to send me back to school so that I would not miss the college entrance examination. She looked at me lying on the bed and smiled coldly. "You don't have to go to school now, are you satisfied? You won't say you are under a lot of pressure anymore, right?" I didn't respond. She asked someone to look after me and went on a business trip. My mother is very busy at work and often has to go on business trips. When my sister was still alive, she would take care of me. Later, my sister passed away and I took care of myself. But my mother never neglected to supervise our studies. There is a camera in the study room, and she can always check the surveillance to see if my sister and I are studying according to the plan. She can't give me love or companionship. When the teacher came to see me, he was inevitably surprised to learn that I had depression. I am usually gentle and polite, and I study hard, and I can't see anything unusual. In fact, depression does not necessarily mean being depressed all day, losing control of emotions, and just trapping yourself in the room. I can communicate normally and respond with a smile, but when I am alone, I will suffer a deeper emotional backlash and even lose control of my behavior. After the teacher left, someone unexpected came. The man who came was the boy who killed my sister, Jason, as my mother said. He and my sister were in the same grade but different classes in high school, and later they were admitted to the same university. My mother didn't know, but I knew him. For a long time, I felt that my sister was very happy. It was not the kind of polite smile that was just right in front of others, but the kind of good mood that came from the heart and reached the bottom of her eyes. So I knew Jason. He looked cold, but he would call me Zoe gently. This was the first time he took the initiative to appear in front of me after my sister passed away. I thought he didn't want to see anyone from our family. Jason came in with a fruit basket. After staring at me for a while with his black eyes, he sighed and asked, "Zoe, are you okay?" It was such a simple and ordinary sentence, but I slowly felt my eyes were sore and swollen. When I was doing homework despite my illness, my mother didn't ask me if I was okay. When I had mental problems and my grades dropped, my mother didn't ask me if I was okay. Even when I was on the verge of death, my mother didn't ask me if I was okay. And this concern was belatedly provided by the person she hated so much. I forced a smile and called him hoarsely, Jason. My suicide story was posted online. Although my personal information was not public, he recognized me and waited for a few days until my mother was on a business trip. He came to visit me. A small stack of sticky notes placed next to the pillow fell down. When Jason picked it up, he glanced at it and asked me what it was. I was a little stunned. For a long time, I had poor sleep, either insomnia or waking up many times a night. And during the rare time I could fall asleep, I would repeatedly dream about things at home. The psychologist said that to prescribe the right medicine, you must first find the root cause. He asked me to write down the content of each dream, so there was a continuous record. Even now that I am hospitalized, I have not changed this habit. The number of sticky notes at home is much more than this. Sister, when will mom come back? I haven't seen her for a long time. Your grades don't allow you to spend time on scribbling anymore, so don't go to the painting class anymore. If you were as smart as sister, I wouldn't have to worry so much. This ranking doesn't meet my expectations, which proves that you haven't worked hard enough. Everyone will only remember the first place, no one will remember the second or third place, so if you want to do it first. At that time, I looked through those records again and again, and I knew very well that my heart not was my mother. I used to long for her to care about me more than studying, but that desire was exhausted in the disappointment day after day. Because of my mother's absolute control over me and her requirements beyond my ability, I began to live in fear of her again. So I got sick. But my mother couldn't understand me, she would only think that my depression was due to cowardice. So I felt that I couldn't get better. Jason took out a new, unopened album from his black backpack. I bring this for you. You can read it when you're bored in the hospital. I like to draw, but my mother thinks it's useless. It's better to spend time on studying and improving my grades. I haven't bought an album for a long time, let alone touched a paintbrush. Do you feel that you can't get excited about anything, have no expectations for tomorrow, don't care about the things around you, and your heart is stagnant? My eyes moved slightly. He put the album in my arms and said to me in a gentle voice, let's pick up our hobbies again first, okay? I remember you are very good at drawing. My fingers curled up slightly, I lowered my eyes and stared at the album, and said calmly, Mom won't let me touch it. Jason was not surprised by my answer. You are a person, not a machine. A machine will break down if it runs 24 hours a day for a long time, so it is normal for people to get sick and need to rest. The key is how to cure the disease. Remember, everything that happens in life is attracted by yourself. You will have your own ideas, your own preferences, and the life you want to live. Be kind to yourself, live a good life, and good things will come as promised. He peeled an apple and handed it to me. Since life has not given up on you, you should not let it down. Chapter 4. Perhaps because he was worried about me, Jason came again the next day, accompanied by a kind-looking auntie, his mother, who also brought soup she cooked herself. Your sister said that you have similar tastes to hers, and I think you will like the soup my mother cooks. Jason explained, my mother knows that you are Anyen's sister, and she also wants to see you, so she came with us. Jason's mother stood by and smiled gently. My sister said that Jason's family is very nice. I have only met Jason a few times, and have never met his family. It can be said that I am a stranger to them. I never thought that they would show such kindness and concern to me. This is probably because they love the whole family. When the warm soup entered my mouth, I just felt swollen in my heart, and I couldn't tell what it felt like. After my mother went on a business trip, I was only accompanied by a strange aunt who was invited to take care of me. Jason and his mother kept a just right frequency to visit me in the hospital, so that I would not be immersed in a world of one person for a long time, nor would they appear so frequently that I would feel troubled. Occasionally, I still couldn't control myself, and desperate thoughts would appear in my heart, but they just diverted my attention, and I didn't let my mother know all this. After being hospitalized for half a month, I went home to recuperate. On the first day after I was discharged from the hospital, Jason took me to his house for dinner, saying that it was to celebrate my discharge. Jason's family was average, and the four of them lived in a not-so-big house, but their home was full of a life atmosphere that I envied. That was incomparable to the emptiness and desolation of my home. Jason had a younger brother who was 1 year younger than me and was in his second year of high school. That night, his monthly test results came out, and he came back excitedly with the report card. I took a look at it inadvertently, and he specially circled his ranking, so I could see it at a glance. How to say it? I thought that my sister and I were born from the same mother, and the gap in grades was already big enough. In the end, in front of Jason and his brother, this gap was not enough. I carefully observed their reactions. To my surprise, Jason looked calm, and his uncle looked at it and said happily, "Wow, the history score doesn't start with 2. There is progress. I was shocked. Jason asked me to eat and explained to me, this kid is not good at academics, but he has strong limbs and can develop into a sports student. Jason's brother poked the rice with chopsticks and protested, brother. How can you talk like that? Auntie smiled and picked up a chicken wing for him, comforting him, my child doesn't need to be excellent, just healthy and happy. It turns out that not all families are the same. I clenched the chopsticks in my hand slightly, and I can roughly understand why my sister likes Jason's family so much. What we desire in our hearts can only be found and felt from other people's families. Their home is full of warmth and relaxation. It is the utopia of my sister's inner world, where she can get a short relaxation. At this moment, I have the same feeling. My home and Jason's home are not far away, about half an hour's walk. After dinner, Jason pushed me and walked me back, as a walk after dinner. I still have a gold medal Jason gave me in my hand. He said he wanted to share his good luck with me so that I can be healthy and have everything I want in the future. I thought it was his honor and had special meaning, so it was hard to accept it. He waved his hand and said, sister, it's okay. I have many gold medals and there will be more in the future. It's okay to give you a gold medal, but it's not okay to give you a silver medal. I only have one. I stroked the gold medal and couldn't help asking, Jason, have your uncle and aunt never thought about making your brother's grades as good as yours? Jason chuckled, there's nothing wrong with him now. What is the definition of excellence? Absolutely high scores in every academic subject? He shook his head. That's too limiting. Excellence itself does not have such a single standard. He is not good at academic subjects, but it does not prevent him from having his own world in sports. Jason stopped and squatted in front of me to look at me straight in the eye. It's very tiring to put other people's expectations on yourself. The most important thing is to find a way to study and live that suits you. We can be not so perfect, not so outstanding, as long as we work hard, it's good enough. People who work hard will get good results. When I returned to the study room that night, I stared at the small blackboard next to the desk in a daze. On the blackboard was the study schedule my mother had made for me, which specifically specified what study tasks I should complete in each time period. After a long time, I reached out and took down the study schedule, tearing it into pieces bit by bit. I was breaking open the cage that had trapped me for many years. Chapter 5. I started going back to therapy. Ironically, I have to thank my mother for putting a lot of living expenses into my card every month, which far exceeds my actual expenses. Because of this, I have money to go for psychotherapy. Because my mother never expected this arrangement. After each psychotherapy, I would enter a state of silent fatigue, and need to digest the low mood of that period alone. I can't catch up with this year's college entrance examination, so I can only take next year's. There is more than a year to prepare new plans. I took out the painting tools that had been put aside for a long time. The paints can no longer be used and need to be bought again. When Jason wanted to take me to the park to relax, I took the painting tools with me. When he saw the things in my arms, he curved his eyes and helped me put them in the trunk. I was painting by the lake, and he was reading a book beside me, and occasionally talked to me. My hand injury has not fully recovered, and I still tremble slightly when I hold the pen now. But this small shortcoming can't suppress my joy that I can paint again. I can't hold the pen for a long time for the time being, so I have to rest for a while after painting for a while. So Jason took the initiative to bring up the matter between him and my sister. Actually, I have seen Jason go to pay respects to my sister. Once, I was so sad that I had to go to the cemetery alone to find my sister, and then I met him. But I didn't go up to meet him at that time. After that, every year when my mother and I went to pay respects to my sister, we would see a bunch of flowers that my sister liked placed in front of her grave. I asked Jason if he still liked my sister very much. Actually, my sister has been dead for so long, he should have moved on. He is still so young, he will meet another good girl. Jason looked a little strange, and after a while he said, your sister and I are not in a relationship, didn't she tell you about us? I shook my head blankly. They are not in a relationship? Then why are his family so nice to me? Isn't it because they love the whole family? He rubbed his brows with a smile and explained, I met your sister because she saved me once. If she hadn't called the police in time, I would have been trapped in the alley with both hands broken. Our family is very grateful to her. She and I are very good friends. For a while, I noticed that Anian was emotionally abnormal, and I always wanted to do something to help her. Knowing that she likes my family, I invited her to come over as a guest. Later, her mood really improved significantly. At this point, Jason's smile faded and he didn't mention the follow-up. We fell silent. Jason was probably upset because he had clearly grabbed his sister's hand. If he had a little more time, he could have pulled her out. But Mom discovered the connection between them. I'm not sure what Mom did at the time. It seems that she went to my sister's school to make a scene. Because I remember that my sister had a very fierce quarrel with Mom after she came back. My sister cried and accused my mother of not knowing the facts and being unreasonable, saying that she was tired of her control. I have never seen my sister collapse like that. She has always been gentle and tolerant in front of me. The next night, my sister ended her life in the most extreme way. Mom blamed her for being so blinded by love that she didn't even want her family until the end. I can't help your sister, but I hope I can help you. You have one more chance to choose than your sister. Remember to live the way you want. It turns out that it is not what I thought. They just wanted to repay a favor. Sometimes kindness comes back in time. My sister helped Jason, and Jason's family helped me. Somehow, it seemed like the best gift my sister left for me. I held the brush tightly in my hand and smiled. I know. Chapter 6. I started to spend more and more time on painting, while also reviewing my academic subjects. In fact, the level of busyness is almost the same as before, but I don't feel suffocated anymore. My mother finally came back after a 3-month business trip and posted a new study schedule on my small blackboard. She said, "You have rested enough, it's time to study again." I glanced at her without saying anything, and quietly worked on the questions while enduring the oppression she brought to me. The set of painting tools at home was put aside again. In September, I re-enrolled in high school to repeat my senior year. My home is not too far from the school, and I am a day student. Evening self-study ends at 9 o'clock, but I postponed the time to 10 o'clock before leaving school. I said that I would be more focused in the classroom, but in fact I only spent an hour on painting. I left a set of painting tools in school. My mother did not object, but occasionally appeared at the gate of my school at 10 o'clock, looking at me inquiringly, trying to find something unusual on my face. If the school did not allow outsiders to enter at will, I think she would rather go directly to my class for a surprise inspection. After arriving home at 10:15, I still had to follow the 1.5-hour study plan that my mother had set for me before I could wash and sleep. I got up at 5:40 in the morning, had breakfast at 6, studied at home until 7:30 and then went to school. I became visibly thinner, but fortunately my mental state was still okay. In mid-October, my mother and I went to the psychologist together, and the diagnosis had changed from severe to moderate. My mother said, "Since the situation has improved, it proves that your attention can be more focused than before. Can you restore your original ranking in the exam at the end of the month?" I didn't say anything and turned into a stationery store. My mother's eyes quickly locked on a family of 3 who were also shopping in the store. Her eyes became sharp and resentful. They were my father and his wife and children who had been divorced from my mother for many years. I actually don't have much feeling towards my father, because they divorced when I was very young, and he never came back to see us. When my sister died, I called him, and before I opened my mouth, I heard a boy's voice on the other end of the phone calling him Dad. My dad got stuck in my throat and I couldn't call him out, so I simply hung up the phone. My mother's unwilling voice rang in my ears. "Zoe, you have to remember what they are like now. You can only slap them in the face when you are successful. Who said that having a daughter is a loss of money?" My mother's almost pathological request for my sister and me to climb to the top probably stems from my father's betrayal. I picked up a box of ballpoint pens from the shelf, and a few notebooks, and asked calmly, "Are you living your life based on resentment towards him, or for yourself?" The proud mother drew a circle on the ground and trapped herself in the pain of being betrayed. Then, she shared part of the pain with my sister and me, without considering my sister and my wishes, and forcibly used the lives of 3 people to complete her revenge on my father. But whether the other party really cares or not is still unknown. My mother frowned and looked at me, with obvious displeasure in her voice. "Are you lecturing me?" "No. Did you hear what I just said?" I hummed casually, then took the things and went to check out. My mother is someone I am very afraid to face. Every word she says will cause me more or less pressure, but the best way to overcome fear is to face it. The first step to face fear is to do things at my own pace, selectively block what my mother said, and reduce interference. Since my mother came back from a 3-month business trip, she has been on short business trips for nearly half a year. I didn't meet Jason, nor did I go to his house again, so as not to cause trouble. He would ask me about my recent situation on WeChat, and occasionally leave something with the security uncle, asking me to pick it up when I am free. The first gift I gave back to their family was an honorary certificate for my artwork winning the 3rd prize. Letting them see the new me is the best way I can give them in return, but I didn't expect that my mother would soon find out about it. Chapter 7. When I finished washing up and went back to my room to rest, my mother was standing by my bed, holding my mobile phone tightly in her hand, shaking with anger. I didn't delete the WeChat chat history with Jason. Although the chat contents were normal conversations and there was no sign of ambiguity, Jason's family was no different from murderers in my mother's mind, so her big reaction was normal. I just made a mistake because I didn't know when my mother knew the unlocking password of my phone. I was not surprised that she would look through my things. After all, she found out that my sister had contact with Jason because she found my sister's diary in private. She threw the phone at me and asked me in a mad voice, "When did you get in touch with this person? Why does their family want to haunt us? You haven't learned enough from your sister, right? How many times have I told you that you can't think about anything else except studying? Are you so unwilling to be lonely? Do you have any sense of shame?" I finally understood why my sister was so upset at that time and accused my mother of being ignorant of the facts and unreasonable. To me, Jason was my brother who helped me when I was desperate. There was no transgression in our conversation and behavior. I don't know how she saw that I had other thoughts. My mother's hands holding my arms kept tightening, and the pain from both sides made me frown. She shook my body hard, as if trying to shake me awake. Zoe, I won't allow it. Did you hear me? I won't allow you to make any mistakes in this college entrance examination. I can't let them ruin you. After she let go of me and walked out, I grabbed her wrist in time and asked in a cold voice for the first time, what are you going to do? Use the same means as before to make people restless? Have you forgotten how you lost your sister? Do you really think your sister is crazy about love? Or do you not mind losing me in the same way? My mother's fierce eyes changed slightly, and her face was a little pale. I looked sarcastic. If I'm gone, what bargaining chips do you have to slap Dad in the face? I don't want to waste time explaining to Mom how Jason's family saved me. She won't listen, because she will never think she is wrong. There are still 3 months before the college entrance examination. If you don't cause trouble for the Zhou family, I will prepare for the exam quietly, and you still have a chance to prove to Dad that he is wrong. For the first time, Mom felt that I was beginning to lose her control. She asked me in disbelief, you don't care about me now, do you? I've given so much for you, but I'm still not as good as that family of strangers? Don't you care about your mother? I let go of my mother's hand and bent down to pick up the phone that fell on the ground. Suppressing the emotions in my eyes, I held the phone tightly and asked, will your mother ask such a hypocritical question? We were deadlocked for a long time. My mother closed her eyes and softened her tone. Zoe, I won't do anything to them. I'm just heartbroken that you don't understand my painstaking efforts at all, and now you treat me like an enemy. You will understand in the future. My requirements for you now are all to pave the way for your future. You can only prove how good you are if you get into a top prestigious school. So, you have to be obedient and don't be distracted at this stage, okay? See, the only time she was willing to give in was not because she was worried that the relationship between me and her would break down. She was just afraid that I didn't follow the path she had already set for me. I smiled and stared at her without saying anything. Mom looked away, told me to go to bed early, and left my room. Of course I would study hard for the exam. Even if she didn't say it, it was something I had planned to accomplish. Chapter 8. As the college entrance examination approached, my mother became visibly more nervous about my review status. My sister was recommended to a prestigious university through a competition, so she didn't need to take the college entrance examination, so my mother didn't worry about it. I didn't react much to this, and because I had enough time to prepare, my mentality was very calm. In June, I successfully completed the exams for all subjects. When I came out of the examination room, the sun was still dazzling. I took a deep breath and felt much more relaxed. My mother came up to me and asked me eagerly, how is it? Do you think your score will be better than the third mock exam? I think so. My mother nodded, and then asked me to get in the car and take me home. The examination room is not close to home. She didn't allow me to eat outside during the college entrance examination, for fear that I would feel uncomfortable and affect the exam if I ate unclean things, so she would send food to me at noon. Today is the last day. She didn't leave after she came at noon and stayed outside the examination room. When I sat in the co-pilot seat, I accidentally saw Jason standing under a tree not far away and watching me leave quietly. He raised his lips slightly, as if he was very confident in me. I stretched my hand out of the car window and waved it twice, as a response to him. At the end of June, the college entrance examination results came out, and I scored 685 points. That was the highest score I could get in so many exams, and it was proof of my hard work. Compared with the provincial champion who scored 705 points, my mother still felt regretful, but it was not unacceptable. After all, with this score, it would be no problem to enter the higher education institution she favored and study the major she asked me to choose. When my mother thought everything was going in the direction she wanted, I chose a famous art college. What she once thought was scribbling, I finally regarded it as my main direction and dream. She didn't know at all that I had made a lot of preparations for my dream. My mother was so angry that she said she would not bear my tuition and cut off my living expenses. She said I would definitely regret not listening to her, but I have found a sponsor with the help of my instructor. Relying on scholarships and part-time wages, I spent my college life steadily. At the age of 22, one of my artworks, Shinchu, stood out in an international art competition and began to emerge. The way my mother looked at me began to change. She tried to repair our relationship, but some concerns were not given when needed. When I no longer pinned my hopes on her and could stand on my own, I would not feel anything no matter how much she cared for me. She did not know that her 2 daughters, who were emotionally bound to her, had already died in the same way. My mother and I got along in a tepid way. At the age of 27, I held my first solo exhibition and received a lot of attention. The media interviewed me on the last day of the exhibition. In addition to asking about my creative process, they also asked some more personal and sharp questions. For example, it was rumored that I had mental problems. I frankly admitted that I had received treatment in this regard when I was young, and later the condition was under control and has been stable over the years. We will always face various pressures in life. I hope everyone can adjust their mentality. We can allow ourselves to be less perfect, allow ourselves to have shortcomings, and allow ourselves to maintain a proper sense of relaxation. Everyone wants to be an excellent person, but excellence is always defined in a one-sided way. I think whether a person is good or not depends on whether he works hard, finds his inner direction, works hard, and lives up to himself. Life will not let those who work hard lose. Depression exists at all ages. I hope it can also attract the attention and care of family members. The media asked, then you can survive that period of depression and achieve the current achievements. What do you want to say to the important people? My mother stood in the crowd with her eyes shining, trying to get closer to me. My eyes stayed on her face for a second, and then my eyes fell on the outermost edge of the crowd. I left my original position and walked to the back, and everyone made way for me in time. I passed by my mother whose smile was frozen, and finally stood in front of Jason. He smiled at me. I stood on tiptoe and gave him a hug. Thank you, Jason. Your family caught me when I fell and helped me rebuild my life. Those dark days are now in the past. Now when I think of them, I feel relieved. My life from now on is long and bright. End of story.